We're going to go through the model sentences for stage 20 in Cambridge Latin course. These are on page 162 in your book, or I have a sheet for you to take notes on that looks something like this. For the purpose of our assignment today, we are going to go through these scenes one by one. You can take notes on your paper as we go along. But we will be doing it here. Before we begin, let's look at the picture here. That's going to give us a little bit of context for what's going on. What you perhaps missed in the previous stage is that Barbilus has gotten a spear in his shoulder in the fight that he was in, and as a result, he is injured. So you can see here that Barbilus is being carried. He's the guy on the stretcher here, and he's being carried into his house. If you look at the picture, you can see the lararium back here. That's the shrine to the household gods. You can see the doors here. So they're going into the atrium through the fauces. That's our setting. It looks like he is being carried by 4 people that know him. As we start translating, we'll get a better idea of who those people are. Servi ad vilam revenerunt barbilum portantes. Now there's a new construction that we'll be learning in this series of model sentences. So we're going to keep an eye out for that. Servi ad vilam revenerunt barbilum portantes. The slaves returned to the house carrying Barbilus. So here we've got our main verb. The slaves returned. Pay attention to that perfect tense ending. The slaves returned to the house carrying Barbilus. Now, our other verb here, portantes, doesn't have a verb ending, but yet it conveys an action, carrying. So this word is part adjective and part verb. In order, as we discussed this in class, we didn't come up with a name for it for a while. So we're just going to call it our verb-adjective hybrid for a while. As we look at our sentence, servi ad vilam revenerunt barbilum portantes, that word means carrying, but it's also an adjective, so it's modifying another word. The slaves are the ones who are carrying, okay? So portantes is modifying servi. The slaves returned to the house carrying Barbilus. Our next sentence, Ancillae prope lectum stabant lacrimantes. The slave girls were standing near the bed, crying. Again, if we look at our main verb here, we can see it is also set in the past, but it's ongoing. The slave girls were crying. That stabant is our imperfect verb. The slave girls were standing near the couch, crying. Okay, here's another one of these verbs that's acting like an adjective, lacrimantes. If we ask what or who is crying, we get the girls, the slave girls. Okay, the slave girls crying were standing next to the couch or near the couch. So lacrimantes, there's our verb-adjective hybrid that's modifying a noun but is also showing action. The slave girls were standing near the couch crying. Next up, we've got a scary-looking guy here. Astrologus in cubiculum irrupit clamans. Okay, so as we look at this, we want to see, first off, astrologus is not a word that we've had so far. Yet, if you just were to guess at its meaning by what it looks like, what would you guess? It kind of looks like the English word astrologer. When you look that up in the back of your book, you find that yes, it really does mean astrologer. So astrologus in cubiculum irrupit clamans. The astrologer bursts into the room shouting. Now in class there was a discussion about this word right here, irrupit. Is it bursts in the present tense, or is it burst in the perfect tense? And in order to determine that, we had to look at the four principal parts. The four principal parts, if you look them up in the back of your book, are irrumpo, irrumpere, irrupi, and irruptus. Okay, so we have to look, is it a present tense verb or is it a perfect tense verb? And if you look carefully, you see that irrumpo has an M here, whereas irrupi does not. This word irrupit does not have an M, so just based on the stem, we know that this is a perfect ending, isti it. The astrologer burst into the bedroom shouting. Now here, we have another one of these verb-adjective hybrids. The astrologer burst into the room shouting. The astrologer is the one shouting. He's also the one who burst in, but that's not, this clamans here is describing him. What was he doing when he burst in? How did he burst in? What was he like as he burst in? The astrologer, shouting, burst into the room. It's not a true adjective because it conveys some sort of action. That's why it's an adjective-verb hybrid. It also, if you look, has a different ending than the others. We had clamans. If you look back at the page before, we have lacrimantes. So we had an ntes, and here we have an nts. So that is a different ending. We'll talk about that in a bit. Barbelos. Here's Barbelos back here. He's not looking so hot. Barbelos in lecto recumbens astrologum audevit. Barbelos, reclining in the bed, heard the astrologer. Now, he didn't have any problem hearing the astrologer because remember, the astrologer burst into his room shouting. So, of course, he heard that. So Barbelos heard, and we've got that telltale V there that tells us this is a perfect ending. Audivit. Barbelos recumbens in lecto astrologum audivit. Barbelos, reclining in the bed, heard the astrologer. In our last model sentence here, we have por meo ad urbem contendit medicum quaerens. So this is his slave Phormio. And Phormio is off in search of something. Phormio ad urbem contendit. There's our main verb. And this, again, is perfect tense. Phormio hurried to the city. Medicum quaerens. Hurried to the city, searching for a doctor. Okay, this word medicum, this is where we get our word medical, medication, any of those that have to do with a doctor. That's or the medical profession. That's where we get those words from. Now here we've got Phormio ad urbem contendit, medicum quaerens. Phormio hurried to the city, searching for a doctor. Again, Phormio is the one who is searching for. This adjective-verb hybrid is modifying Phormio. So what do we call that adjective-verb hybrid? Go ahead and take some notes here, but we have something that is part adjective because it modifies a noun or a pronoun, but it's also part verb because it has tense, searching for, it's happening right now, that's present, and it also conveys action. Okay, so it's part adjective, it's part verb. We call this a participle. If it helps you to think of it as participle, because it's part adjective, part verb, that may be a good mnemonic device to help you remember that it's a participle that is part adjective, part verb, as that it has gender, number, case, because it has to agree in gender, number, and case with the noun it modifies. But it also has tense. These that we've talked about are in the present tense. So gender, number, case, and tense. Let's look at the forms a little bit. What do you notice about these words? We have portantes, lacrimantes, clamans, recumbens, and quaerens. So as we talked about this in class, these are all participles. Okay, so let's look at how these participles are formed. You can clearly see the stem of the verb here. Porta, lacrima, clama, recumbe, and quaere. And then we are left with untes, untes, and then nts, nts, and nts. So what is the difference between portantes and lacrimantes and clamans, recumbens, and quaerens? Portantes and lacrimantes are plural. Clamans, recumbens, and quaerens are all singular. That's the difference between these. So if we look at our plural verbs, and if we were to go back to the beginning, look back at sentences 1 and 2, this was servi portantes, the slaves, that's plural. And ancillae lacrimantes, that's slave girls, that's plural. The other three, astrologus, clamans, barbellus, recumbens, and Phormio quaerens, those are all singular. So as we're looking at this, we want to see if we can come up with our declension chart here, to see if we can figure out what the endings are. Okay, so there's our chart. We've got our singular, we've got our plural. We know that this is going to be ns, this is going to be ntes for our participle or present participle endings here. And I gave the students a challenge that if they could come up with the rest of the endings, I would give them a bonus point on the test. So if you come up with the endings for these and bring it to me when you return to school next, it will be +1 bonus point on the next test. So I'm not going to spoil it by giving you those answers. I am, however, going to challenge you with the phrase volens et potens. Volens et potens is a motto that means willing, from volo. We learned volo back in, I believe, stage 14 maybe, 13 or 14. Willing, et meaning and potens coming from possum. So you have willing and able. Okay, but these are those ns endings that go with participles. So volens et potens means willing and able, and that's a common Latin motto that you ought to know. So volens et potens. My hope is that as you are willing and able to continue to learn these, that you will do your best and learn it well so that what follows after will be much easier.